I want to welcome everybody for being here. This is our final section. It's the last day of our preliminary webinar. We will continue in the beginning of the next year with more meetings. This is a very special day for our webinar. We have the pleasure to have with us Milo Rau, who is going to speak about his work. But before Milo Rau, I have the pleasure to introduce my dear professor, Freddy de Creus. Freddy de Creus, as our previous speakers, Erika Fischer-Lichte, Oliver Taplin, Henry Schoenmakers, and Eleni Papazou, have been some of the most acclaimed speakers in our summer courses of the network, of ArcNet. And I'm really, really happy that they are every time with us. And I want to thank them again for being with us. So, Fred de Creus is a professor emeritus of the Ghent University. He's a classical philologist, but he's much more interested in theater than many people, I would say. They show interest in theater. He's started at Ghent University in 1981. He was responsible for Latin literature, literary theory, mythology, comparative literature, and theater history, and especially interested in ritual theater. He did work with many groups in the theater, and he published a lot. Among his recent publications, I would mention the Post-Colonial Perspectives of the Tragic, a book on performance of the comic in Arabic theater, and I would mention his recent book on ritual theater of the ritual theater of Theodoros Terzopoulos. It has been published by Agra in 2016 as the ritual theater of Theodoros Terzopoulos, η τελετουργία στο θέατρο του Θόδωρου Τερζόπουλου. He worked as a dramaturg with numerous productions. Between others, he also worked with Jan Fabre at Mount Olympus. After his retirement in 2010, he and his wife Gina founded a school on the Canary Islands that focuses on the effects of psychotherapy and psychoenergetics. Now he's head of the advisory board of the National Theatre of Ghent. Thank you again, Freddy, for being with us, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Plato. The topic I want to address today has to do with Anthropocene and the place of the Oresteia in it. I think it was obvious for the last 2 days that every century read the classical tragedies different ways. Why? From a philosophical point of view, why? Why is that like that? Maybe interesting to see that is always a question of temporarily filling up our own incompleteness and alienation by constantly providing them with new narrativity. That means an endless exercise in filling up the black hole that we are ourselves. According to Lacan, we keep running after our desires without ever being able to catch them completely. Or in the words of Hans Blumenberg, his beautiful work, Arbeit am Mythos, Work on Myth, we are condemned to continuously attempt to keep out the inhuman and keep at a distance the absolute reality that we can never really know. We have to do it again and again through religion, science, art, and culture. Because we are deficient beings, Mangelwesen, who have no biological niche of our own and who must therefore defend ourselves against this paralyzing reality by means of symbols, metaphors, and narratives that we constantly design ourselves. Against a general background like this, I think that the 5th century BC can be understood as a time of transition between mythos and logos, between imagination and science, and times like these simply need a changing symbolism to represent the basic categories of being human. For centuries, the West has designed narratives in the form of a patriarchal imagination, and the use, or should I say the abuse, of the earth in order to continue suppressing the feminine element in religion and art. At this point, I need Fabian Scheidler and his very interesting work, Das Ende der Megamaschine, a book that Milo introduced in Ghent. He invited him to present this book. It interests me because Fabian Scheidler uses the notion of the myth of progress. He's deconstructing many other myths that have led us to believe in eternal progress. Actually, I quote now, the standard version that underlies Western civilization, a story about a hard-won process of progress that eventually led to more prosperity, more peace, more knowledge, more culture, more freedom, wars, environmental disasters, and genocides, count in that version as slips, setbacks, side effects of a broadly blessed process of increasing civilization. Yet, during the last century, man also discovered that his way of living and imagining has brought with it a footprint so large that this earth has entered a new geological era, the Anthropocene, or the early Anthropocene, resolutely declared as the age of man. Broadly speaking, it means that we are the first people to live in a world created by us, determined by human choices, and in which we risk our own survival. So definitely things have changed around us. What does that mean for theater? I think that this observation compels us to reinvent ourselves, to question our political and economic choices, and also to analyze the artistic positions we could assume now. When I read this very text to you, who am I? I'm talking as a white person, taking fully advantage of the benefits of this myth of progress. I am among those who helped to write Western history from the point of view of a victor who writes history itself. But as soon as I hear from Milo in a couple of minutes, the situation of the survivors in Mosul that he discovered a couple of years ago, and all the other places, Iraq, where we get our oil from, then I fall outside this mythical framework. Progress, yes, but for whom and at whose expense? More urgently, I need to feel connected to them, to the people in Mosul. And I realize that now, more than ever, we as individuals need to be united with other individuals, with other people worldwide. Definitely the question that was raised during the screening of Orestes in Mosul, namely why not to go to Mosul, is of a vital importance. In any case, a new kind of connectedness will become a key word in any rewriting of the old myth of progress. That's why the theater of today cannot be separated, I think, from a theater of crisis, as Avra Sidiropoulou specifies in her forthcoming book, Staging 21st Century Tragedies, Theater, Polis, and Global Crisis. What is the theater of crisis today? To quote her, theater of crisis, is that not a recent practice of politically engaged art that could stand as our century's equivalent to the genre of classical tragedy in both scope and effect? So what kind of phenomena do belong to a theater of crisis? And what is the relations with what we traditionally assume to be tragicality? Do we need other notions to express our situation today? When Buckingham Palace is ankle deep in water at the end of this century, when Bangladesh has disappeared into the Bay of Bengal, this will be tragic because it could have been avoided. At a moment like this, I would quote some words like those expressed by Kay Sara in her part Antigone in Amazonia. Is there not a totally new sense of the tragic breaking out? And is the most drastic experience of the tragic not stored in seeing the destruction of the planet before our eyes and turning away our eyes from it? As she, as an indigenous artist and activist said, Kay Sara, the lead to be performed in Milo Rao's production Antigone in Amazonia, and she was addressing us, opening the 2020 Vienna Festival on the stage of the Burgtheater Vienna. I quote, as you see, today's turbo-capitalist system poses a threat to the Amazon, the planet's green lung. It has to be stopped. This is an accusation, an outcry, a wake-up call. This madness must stop. The problem is not that you don't know that our forests are burning and our people are dying. The problem is that we get used to knowledge of that type. Unfortunately, and unquote, unfortunately, because of the COVID-19, the preparations of this place had to be stopped, and this address by Kay Sara was aired by internet, but taken over by all newspapers. So we cannot say that Aeschylus was blind to phenomena like that. He warned us. One of the most important moments in the unfolding of this triptych is the sense that with the pronouncement of Athena and the installation of a new court, a period of pronounced progress has begun. Old mythical violence that held the whole Atrid family in its grip was supposed to be over. Democracy was supposed to be born. A clear longing for democracy, we always felt it in every staging of the Oresteia, for enlightenment and for a new legal order. This is also the position taken by Habermas, who always wanted to pay attention to the possibilities offered by human communication, reason, freedom, and thus also by the human ability to deliberate together and rationally learn and continue to understand each other. But on the other hand, this trilogy is also marked by a number of destabilizing ideas. Almost all the characters take part in a game of ironic deception, intending the opposite of what is said. Language seems to be a tricky business, which is purely Foucault. Ultimately, this trilogy does lead to a new synthesis, albeit a discomforting one, where Athena needs every kind of rhetoric game and manipulation in order to persuade the old Furies. Studying the impact of this kind of thought, Christopher Rocco said, consensus of a kind is achieved, but by a manipulative rhetoric, which the trilogy seeks to overcome, and through a sexually ambivalent figure who transgresses the very norms of gender she seeks to establish. 3 recent examples. On the stage, who had serious problems with Oresteia. I skip Francois Rocher because I have here before my eyes Castellucci, of course, in his Oresteia. Oresteia subtitle, Una Commedia Organica, question mark. Is it really an organic comedy? He was asking us. His version of the Oresteia refused to take for granted the cultural conclusions of this Oresteia. And my fellow Belgian director, Luc Perceval, in his production Ars 2000, he departed from the sexual disruptions in the royal household of Agamemnon to see him as a dominant father, lord, God himself drowning in the round water basin. He was killed by his family members. Orestes tied off his own member and bleeded to death. Electra was closing off her genitals, no longer wishing to be a vessel that seemed to be a passive reception chamber for every fertilization. No more birthing in this type of royal families, no more patriarchal rules. Nothing remained of the myth of the Western progress. But next slide puts me in a totally different light. It will be Delphi. Delphi and my questioning of, do I see in this production and in many others the birth of a new kind of myth, the myth of cosmic interconnectedness. This is Exodus, displayed by Terzopoulos. Of course, today we have this radicalized doubt about the myth of progress. It results in a feeling of fragmentation and alienation. But are we therefore entering a period of a failing civilization, like Fabian Scheidler was writing? Or can this exodus also be experienced in a different way? Terzopoulos' production, very successfully staged at Delphi, also in Carnuntum two months ago, on the remains here of the ancient temple of Apollo, was described by Penelope Hatzidimitriou as, I quote, an event that signified the exit from a reality that seems to be reaching a tragic exit. But she also added that this production was also heading towards a new era. What Sophia Hill, my Greek star actress par excellence, portrayed were indeed not only fragments from a number of classical tragedies and situations, like the Pythia, Medea, Alcestis, and Antigone, fragments from a well-known patriarchal past. She called it archaeological ruins belonging to a process of ruination. But there was also more at stake, exactly at the spot where the python, this mythical primal serpent that lived in the center of the earth, in the cultic center of Gaia, was destroyed by the first generation of transcendental gods. You now saw the actress emerge as a new butterfly, as someone who called up the ancient power of Gaia again and again and transformed the verse from the traditional tragedy into an ecstatic bee buzzing all the time like a busy bee. So on the ruins of this petrified world of Delphi, something new emerged, something that philosophers like Deleuze have been calling becoming other or becoming animal. I saw and I heard Sophia humming like a bee for a long time, and her elemental animal behavior replaced the familiar tragic words and showed that the animal and the earthy that was once damned in this very place was returning. So I was questioning myself, is this the return of a mythos in a dying civilization of a logos? Some years before her, Michel Serres, French philosopher, also said, what the global history enters now into nature again, and the global nature into history. This is a novelty in the philosophy. And in his natural contract, 95, he repeated that the profound changes in environment and climate would force us to rethink our relations with nature in depth. It goes without saying that the ancient goddess Gaia played, again, a leading role in philosophy, in formulating a new balance of thought between man and nature, earth and cosmos. James Lovelock, contemporary high priest of the Gaia hypothesis of the earth as a superorganism, saw in Gaia especially the idea that every movement or change has a measurable effect on the whole and led to an imminent interconnectedness of the world. Bruno Latour had already said in the mid-90s, in the world of cosmotheism, all living organism has a voice and everything is connected to everything. With the Anthropocene, our relationship to nature has shifted irreversibly. For local activities now have global effects, and global developments are causing threatening changes for the regional climate and the local biodiversity. So it is Dionysus that is coming back, not Apollo. Dionysus with his incalculable cosmic energy. Michel Serres makes an uncompromising case for the return of the great god Pan, and Bruno Latour too claims that this time the great Pan is in person is back. It, however, if there is a new and a great sensitivity for a global and cosmic interconnectedness, my question remains, what are the consequences in the world of art and theater? Therefore, I enjoyed it so much to see that my colleague Frank Radatz from Berliner University was part of those people who created a theater of the Anthropocene. According to him, the theater of the Anthropocene wants, I quote, to contribute to an intensive cooperation and networking of artists, scientists, designers, and civil society by means of the stage and urban interventions. The concept is based on Humboldt's idea that only an intact bond between man and nature can be the basis of a sustainable civilization, unquote. This last quote is in fact a revolutionary and activist reformulation of theater, I guess. Theater, a kind of theater that fits the Anthropocene. It is especially true for the first article that Milo wrote in his Manifesto of Ghent when he became the artistic director in 2018. Quote, "It is not just about portraying the world anymore, it's about changing it." This manifesto was drawn up in 10 rules that the city theater of the future should meet. And in his fifth golden book called Why Theater, published in 2020, it involved the responses of more than 100 theater makers from all over the world. Very important question, what is the profile, usefulness, and function of the city theater and of theater in general in a historical period that calls itself the Anthropocene? So major necessary consequences were ruthlessly exposed by Katie Mitchell in a contribution in this very book, Why Theater. Title was Creating a Climate of Change. These are two quotes by Katie Mitchell. I think they're very important. Very ruthless too. Climate change will, and already is in this pandemic, affecting our cultural life and theater practice. Whether we like it or not, many of our models of making theater and touring theater need to change, particularly when it comes to the physical movement of production and artists internationally. We need to find new stories to tell and new forms to tell them with. We have to let go of the habit of thinking about theater as it were a sacred life experience. You can sit in one space with the performers. Next, that has been, without us even knowing it, an unquestioned premise of theater making for people from another age. And now is not a time for rolling out arguments about the sanctity of that life experience. Now is the time for reimagining the art form from scratch, for being more elastic in our thinking, and for reaching out into uncharted territory. We need to widen our definition of theater. Small note, Katie Mitchell will produce next year in our theater a production called No Travel. So to conclude, many profound questions. As soon as we dare to hold our years of traditional practice in the light of a radically changed worldview. In his most recent book, Der Stoff, aus dem wir sind, 2021, the same German philosopher, Fabian Scheidler, quoted at the beginning of my talk, advises to acknowledge that our universe doesn't consist of solid atoms, but of fields of energetic flows, and that these fields speak of a world based on connectedness, self-organization and empathy. Considering the stuff or the fabric we are made of, the stof als dem wir sind, can only refer to a generalized cosmic coherence, where everything is connected to everything, everyone to everyone. Hence, this strongly changed context for doing theater will maybe need, more than we think, activist ways to change the system. But that will become much clearer when Milo explains in a couple of minutes what is meant by his forthcoming book, conclusion of this little paper of mine, Hack the System. That was my conclusion. Hack the system.
Interesting introduction. Now we have with us Milo Rao, who just entered the room. He just opened his camera. I want to thank you again, Milo, for being with us. Of course, Milo Rao does not need any special introduction because all of you know his work. I should say that we did study the Ghent Manifesto in our classroom in the university, where we have a lot of discussion during the last years. Of course, you know that Milo Rao has been he's somebody who's not easy to categorize. He's been studying sociology, German and Romance languages in Paris, Zurich and Berlin with Pierre Bourdieu and Svetlana Todorov. For us who are in academia, these persons mean a lot. He's a Swiss native. He's been publishing a lot. He made over 50 plays. He got awards everywhere where he was. He did tour in about 30 countries. He did come in Greece with 3 of his performances. That was in 2015 with Hate Radio. The next year, in 2016, The Dark Ages, and 2017 with Empire. And we hope to see him again in Greece, and we are really looking forward for his next performance to come. I wouldn't say more. I would prefer to give the floor to Milo Rao, and then we shall discuss with him, we'll talk with him after for some time that we have. Please, Milo.
Hi, Freddie and Platon and the whole rest, and thank you so much for having me. I'm talking from Cologne, and this evening, Freddie, I come back to Ghent, so back to Belgium. And but I think we were. The idea was that we would kind of talk together, Freddie. No?
Yes, indeed, indeed. That was the idea. I have made a little PowerPoint that we can use now, maybe. Yes. This is about you, Rebel with a Cause. You like that title?
It's a beautiful title. You will tell me the cause, Freddie.
Okay. Just to introduce you, you are our artistic leader in Anti-Ghent from 2018. And in the entrance hall, there are 2 monuments that were your signature. This is the first one. This is the Manifesto of Ghent, the Ghent Manifesto. 10 articles are published, 10 basic principles for the future functioning of a new company, inspired by the pattern of the famous dogma movement. 10 conditions. I don't think that people can read them, so maybe it's good to say that theater should be staged in a more global playing area for each production. Rule 5 is important. Use more than 1 language on stage. Rule 6. Involve at least 2 non-professional actors. Rule 7. And run every performance in 10 locations in at least 3 countries. Rule 10. Possibly, you would like, ideally, you would like to pack the entire set of the production in 1 single van and perform 1 production a year in a war zone. So this is a whole new orientation. It's after 2-3 years of practicing with these principles, how do you feel about it?
I mean, The reason why I wrote this manifesto was that I think like all makers in all countries, we were talking in intellectual circles or in the program book since many years that we have to open theater to reality. We have to create our own classics. We have to stop to adapt, but restart to create. We have to research more. We have to have a more diverse cast, more diverse public. We have to have sustainable theater. We have to tour in another way, and so on and so on and so on. And I had the impression that we should this implicit rule make explicit, because for me, being political means to be explicit and to present what you want to do. So to bring theory and practice together. And perhaps this is the basic dialectics that I try to install it by putting this on actually the walls or the entry halls of all the three houses of Ente Ghent, to say you enter, you see what you want to do, and then you can judge yourself, and you can and we become accountable for what we do. I think especially in the times of identity politics, where we hear so many beautiful theories about diversity and about equality and so on. I think the space of representation theater is very important that we put it technically. So it's a bit my practical side as a maker that I said, okay, when I take over a theater as artistic leader, I want to use this institution to change how theater is produced completely. I think for me, the most important point is, I think it's the second one, where we say it's not about the premiere, it's about the production process. It's not about the product. So for me, making theater means the whole circle of research, of who is on stage, and of course also how is it distributed and what remains after. That's why there's the point number 8. One production per year in a space without cultural infrastructure, in a war zone like Mosul, where we went in 2018. By the way, 2016, Mosul was not liberated. Empire we made in Kurdistan and in Syria. When Mosul was liberated in 2017, in 2018, we arrived and started working there, doing the Oresteia. And now 3 years later, we opened a film school together with UNESCO. So for me, theater is not about plays or about having a premiere. It's really about kind of restructuring the whole process, so to have a holistic view on it. And these are beautiful words, again, and I can write them down in books and everything. But for me, it was very important to then make it as explicit as possible. I mean, it's really, you could even call it a pedantic manifesto. And that's what I liked in the dogma by Lars von Trier. He was talking about tripods. He was talking about the use of music. He was not talking about ideology. And I think it's very important that we kind of find a way from ideology to practice, to words, to a circle of doing and talking about it in a transparent way. And that's why this I think every theater, every shop, every school should explicitly put the rules on the wall, because it's also the beginning of many, many discussions I had. That somebody says, for example, Katie Mitchell, but you have to be more explicit in sustainability, in the ecological meaning of the word. So there should be a point 11, and somebody else says there should be a point 12, and so on and so on. So we will have a green manifesto, a touring manifesto, and so on. So I think it's, for example, nothing is said in this manifesto. This is only about production. Nothing is said about the whole back office, for example. So, I mean, there is a lot of space for do more, but being transparent and explicit was for me important by starting a house.
Okay, thank you. Very important is the first article too. It's not about portraying the world anymore. It's about changing it. It's an activist activity that you want to support in the very first place. You have to change something.
Yeah, I mean, you know, of course, it's a quote of the Feuerbach Thesen, as you know, but it's at the other moment for me, it's important to say, okay, I think that the arts in bourgeois times kind of were reduced to a representative in the negative, but also in the positive way of the word tool. And I think it should be much more than this. And actually, that's why I said, okay, when we do plays, for example, I give you an example, the New Gospel. When we did the New Gospel, which is a Jesus film made in Matera, where Pasolini made his film, and Mel Gibson. So I united the surviving actors of Pasolini and Mel Gibson, but I also found outside of Matera all these wild camps of refugees that are by European politics, same situation like in Greece. You have 500,000 of people that is illegalized by European politics, by the non-use actually of the human rights and so on. So you have these people, and I invited them, especially Yvon Sagnier, a black activist from Cameroon, to play the apostles, to play Jesus, to play the biblical roles. And for me, it was important that everybody who would step inside this project would have documents afterwards, so that that art project becomes the machine to legalize people, to create new citizens, if you want. So I said, nobody will be on screen that is illegal anymore afterwards. He will have paper, she will have paper. And that's what we did. And then we created, parallelly to this film, a system of distributing the film directly with the closed cinemas and distributing tomatoes that are produced by the people playing roles in the film. And now we have, until now, we have 750 people legalized, 750 new citizens that were slaves of mafia before, and we want to come to 2000 in the next year. So making a film means distributing, creating a new representation and distribution of dignity, of tools, of films, of tomatoes. And that's what I mean with hack the system. I think plays or films have to be what we call microecologies, or you could also call it a bit more Marxist, microeconomies. So making a film is changing the way how you do films, how you distribute films, what you show in films, who makes films. So that's why we do art. We don't do art to just like add one piece more in art history. And I think that's perhaps what in everyday time was done. And there were moments when the representation was extremely important. For example, when people is asking me, why did you take a black Jesus? Then my answer would not be one of politics of representation, that I would say, okay, we have to get used that Jesus was not white. It's for me more kind of a side effect. That's because he is the only one who has the charisma and the agency to play Jesus in this region of Italy at this time. And if I would have done it somewhere else, it would have been somebody else. For example, in Ghent, it would have been, I don't know, a female Muslim. I don't know, you know. So for me, it's not, this is the important line of representation, because we live in a time where I have the impression that capitalism likes to feminize or blackface itself, if you understand what I mean. It's not changing the system if you put the black president on the position of a white president. It's not changing the system if you have a female Hamlet, what you have in a lot of city theaters, and they think it's revolutionary. You change it when you change the way how the power of these texts is used, by whom it is played, and what it then gives, and how it is really rewritten. So that's for me the point of, it's not about portraying it in another way, perhaps in a more fair, more tolerant way, and more beautiful way. It's about really changing it by portraying it, so that it wouldn't not be the same anymore. And the surroundings of Matera are not, I mean, we are talking about 750 people, so not a lot, but it changed a bit. And I think that's what I feel the need to do at this moment of, for example, using the classics on stage or in cinema.
Thank you. Can I have the slide with the hate radio on it? Not this one. Yes, this one, Milo. This is a real. This is terrible. Huh? This is very, very strong. It took you a very long time to make it up. It is about the manipulation of people through words. A very dangerous practice that every one of us is capable to do, but this has been organized, has been prepared in such a terrifying way that it has been costing you probably a lot of nightmares to do this.
I mean, that's hate radio, and it's the interesting. I mean, it's two things at the same time. It's on the one hand, it's you could say it's a performance or a reconstruction of the radio studio that broadcasted the genocide in Rwanda '94. And the interesting thing is that the people you see sitting here are survivors of the genocide. So they are playing, you could say, the perpetrators while being survivors of what these people did in '94. So, for example, Diogène Tarindwa with the blue suit, he was a child soldier. He was liberating his country at that time from the genocidaire regime, and then became a stand-up comedian. Oh, you have Nancine Houzi, who is just a survivor. She just left Rwanda at that time, as she was part of the family of the Tutsi king, and she only came back with the play. We have, by the way, one white guy, Sébastien Foucault, because in the studio they also had a white moderator. And for me, the interesting thing of this radio studio is that on the one hand, to show what you don't see. Normally, you have in these kind of films, you have skulls, and you have UN soldiers, the blue helmets, and you have kind of all these dead bodies, and you have the massacre itself. And I wanted to show the language, the kind of the brain of the genocide. And when you look inside this brain, it's a very, very funny brain. It's a very leftist brain. So these tropical fascists, they hate Hitler, for example. They think that they are the resistance. They think that the others are the fascists. So you have the victimization, you have the mix of all kind of, for example, Nancy Houzi, she has a Nelson Mandela t-shirt. She wears a Nelson Mandela t-shirt in the studio. They listen to Nirvana. So you see, you are in a postmodern genocide. You mix all kind of things that you would not think that you could find in a racist radio studio. And that was for me the super interesting thing. The face of the evil is a funny one, and it comes not around the corner in black and white like in the old Hitler movies. It's a different way. I remember when we showed it in it's still touring, by the way. But once we showed it in the Centre Pompidou in Paris, which is actually a museum, and then people came in and they thought that this is just a kind of a modern radio studio that is broadcasting in this very moment. So it looks very real. Of course, there is a big story around this genocide we are telling in other projects, like in Compassion, the history of the machine gun, or in because it's a very hermetic play too, very direct, but also very hermetic. So you don't understand, like in many of my plays, what are the reasons of this tragedy you see, what are the motivation of the people you see, and so on and so on. So it's a kind of a quite ethnographical approach that sometimes I have in my plays. So I made side plays like Compassion, or like in 2 weeks I go back to Eastern Congo, because the following project was the Congo Tribunal, a series of tribunals that are also ongoing. So the next one is in 2 weeks. So we always try to work in long series, to not only make a play here and there, but to be in a context for a generation, if possible.
Okay, thank you. Before we go to Mosul, maybe some words about the next slide. It has to do with empire, because there is this is a trilogy. This is part of a trilogy, the Europe trilogy. Maybe for us classical scholars, it's good to ask you, why trilogy? Is this purely Aeschylus, or is this a desire to make a group feeling, something that belongs together for some reasons? Why trilogy? You're using a lot of trilogies.
Yeah, that's true, and often I have even a kind of a satire play in the end, like a little more a monologue or something that is kind of commenting on the whole strategy of that is used in this trilogy. So you could see, for example, Compassion also as as a kind of comment on the whole European trilogy, which is based on a kind of storytelling, as you say. So we have these, I think, 11 or 12 actors and actresses that are telling the story of Europe with three focuses. So you have the first focus, which is Western Europe, with France and Belgium, and about jihadism and based on Chekhov. Then we have the second part, Dark Ages, which is Middle and Eastern Europe, so Germany, Russia, ex-Yugoslavia, civil war, which is based, of course, on Shakespeare. And then we have the third part, Empire, which goes to the origins of Europe in the Middle East. And with, by the way, Maya Morgenstern, who is also in the New Gospel as Mother Mary, and which is a play based on, as you say, Aeschylus. And there I already used Oresteia and parts of Medea, but only as an underlying structure. So I think you have like two small moments of Oresteia and Medea in the whole evening, like two little scenes. But the whole rest is really the tragedy of these people. And what is tragedy? Of course, it's a kind of a small individual life exposed to the big ruptures, the big history that is happening since the Second World War. And that's the story we tell in the trilogy. To answer your question, why trilogies, I think it's an artistic one. I have the impression that always after 3 times I use the format, I made everything I can do with this format, and then I have to leave it and to go to another format. That's also why many people say in my work, in Milo's work, you don't really see a kind of a coherence, because you have like 3 things of this, then you have 4 or 2 perhaps sometimes of this, then you have 3 of this. And parallelly you have another format emerging, and it will also go until a point. For example, after Empire, after the Congo Tribunal, which was concluding the trilogy of the tribunals, for example, I didn't know how to go further than with the Congo Tribunal. And with Empire and storytelling, how I can do it, I don't see how I would continue with this. I did it somehow a little bit, you could say, with Grief and Beauty, but for sentimental reasons.
Okay, thank you. Maybe the setting is now right to go to the tribunal scene. The beautiful video by Daniel de Moustier. Is that possible that we skip a number of slides? We go to number 11, where the tribunal scene could be played. It is a kind of documentary theater that goes along with your theatrical play. And just like in the Europe trilogy, where you are very interested in the private lives of your actors, when you go to Mosul, you have to face the fact that there were no actors, that there were no musicians there, and still you persuaded them to take a part in an adventure that is very special. It's very special.
Yeah, perhaps you can have a look to it. It was a collaboration with the Academy of the Fine Arts. I think we are there, perhaps.
No, not yet. That's the little one. It's the little one.
I knew from the beginning on that this will be the crucial part, how to forgive, because it's really a story that is happening there, a legal story, but also a social story, how to forgive these people that killed your families and that oppressed you for years and years and killed you. So how can you do that? Is it possible? Pardon is important when you want to stop vengeance. You have to pardon, and the problem is that in the Oresteia, for example, you only have total pardon or you have the vengeance. You have to kill somebody. So you have to make the choice in between 2 extreme solutions of it, and that's exactly what is happening in Mosul, because they don't have a kind of a legal tribunal. So bring them to the camps where they are brought with their families, also a topic of the play. It's vengeance, actually. So, and pardon them, difficult too. And interesting fact is that what we found there, that a lot of people is kind of divided in it. They want to stop the vengeance, but on the same time, they can't forgive.
طبعا جمعتكم بهذا المكان حتى نتناقش ببعض الأمور، لأنه أنتم أقراب علي وأنتم تعتبروني فشي كلش غالي عندكم.
داعش هو اللي خرب مدينتنا، قتل الناس، دمرها بالكامل، من بيوت، من مستشفيات، من معاهد، كامل بالكامل. ومن نمسك داعشي احنا المدنيين ما نقدر نقتله، نوديه للمحكمة العراقية وهي تاخذ مجراها. هذا اللي عندنا.
حلو. شنو رأيك؟
نحن نحتاج انه محكمة عادلة، محكمة نظيفة، محكمة خالية من الفساد تحكم الإرهابيين اللي دمروا هاي المدينة. ما نريد محكمة بيها فساد وممكن يدفعون فلوس ويخرجون من العقوبات. نحتاج محكمة حقيقية، محكمة بدون فساد حتى تحاكم داعش.
أنا برأيي إن نحاكم داعش بالقتل، مثل ما يوم قتلونا دمرونا ودمروا هذا البلد. نقتلهم لأن يوم قتلوا طفل بريء، قتلوه دمروه على مود شيء تافه. والناس فرد مرة دمروا نفسيتهم، دمروا حياتهم، دمروا البلد مالنا كلته. عن أشياء خلونا نشوف شيء ما كنا شفناه عمرنا كله. خلونا نشرب مي الساقي، خلونا ناكل اشياء يعني الحشيش خلونا ناكله، دمروا هذا. انا برايي انه حكموا بالقتل وليس بالعداله.
انا لا استطيع ان اقتل، وانا لست مع القتل. انا لا استطيع ان اقتل دجاجه، فكيف بي ان اقتل انسان؟ وبنفس الوقت لست مع العفو، لا استطيع ان اعفو عمن دمر بلدي. هذا امر محير، هاي تراجيديا. أنا غير قادر على اختيار العفو أم القتل.
منو مع الانتقام؟ منو مع العفو؟ اخرس، هذا منكر من عمل الشيطان. لا تتكلم.
Gaitam is de vrouw die Athene gaat spelen, hier in Mosul. En dat is een vrouw die heel sterk is. Mij heeft ze al gezegd dat ze 15 jaar al niet meer geweend heeft. Die heeft al een onwaarschijnlijk leven achter de rug. Haar man is vermoord door Al-Qaeda voor ISIS hier was. Ze is een zoon verloren en die blijft gewoon heel hoopvol in het leven staan. Bijna iedere dag gaat ze naar het kamp waar ISIS-vrouwen samen met hun kinderen zitten. Samen met slachtoffers, met andere vrouwen. En zij geeft les aan de kinderen. Voor haar zijn dat allemaal dezelfde kinderen. En zij vindt het heel belangrijk dat die geëduceerd worden en dat die gederadicaliseerd worden. En daarom krijgen die kinderen ook de gelegenheid om met een vrouw te werken die zelf eigenlijk in het begin van de oorlog 6 maanden gecollaboreerd heeft met ISIS om te overleven. Daarna begrepen heeft wat voor gruwelijks die deden. Maar die is heel vergevingsgezind. En dat is hier een les dat je continu voelt. Ik denk dat wij de ideaalste Athena ever hebben gevonden met Gaitam. Zij moet oordelen over goed en kwaad. Zij moet oordelen en haar stem telt uiteindelijk of de gemeenschap wel vergeeft of niet. Of ze samen verder gaan en stoppen met oorlog om de oorlog, revenge om de revenge.
Divine Athene, hear me. Apollo directed me to a temple, and here I stand in front of you, surrendering my trial, my hope, my life to your judgment.
أثينا ما تقدر تساعدك. هسه لازم تدفع الثمن. الحرية الخارجة عن القانون هي الشر. الإنسان ما يقدر يسوي خير إذا ما يمر بعواقب الشر.
والآن أنا مندهشة. من أنتم؟ من أنتم لتصدروا الأحكام؟ اسمحوا لنا لنكون عادلين، واسمحوا لي بأن أتذكر لسان العدل للعقل. حان الوقت للتصويت. أولئك الذين يصوتون للانتقام يرفعوا يداً، وأولئك الذين يريدون السلام يرفعوا يداً. هذه الأغلبية. سأضم صوتي إلى السلام أيضاً.
لا تحكي عن الحرب الأهلية كثير. الخبيث من كل سوء فهم حتى لا تقسم المدينة مرة ثانية.
عقلها منقسمة إلى قسمين، وكل قسم واحد ضد الآخر.
ماكو.
انطي فينا عقل واحد، كل العقل مثل الزواج، ينطي اثنين من الغرباء طفل واحد.
سلسلة القتل يجب أن تأتي إلى نهايتها. لقد تمت تبرئة أورستوس. انتهت الحرب.
All around me are familiar faces, worn out places, worn out faces, bright and early for the daily races, going nowhere. Their tears are filling up their glasses, no expression. Hide my head, I wanna drown my sorrow. No tomorrow. And I find it.
Yeah, I mean, this was for us a very important project, because then we toured it in Europe. This is the documentary on a play called Orestes in Mosul, where Antegent and the Academy of the Fine Arts in Mosul that just reopened its doors in 2018 in a completely destroyed building, toured in Europe. And that's how we came in contact with the UNESCO, so the cultural branch of the UN. And we decided to ask them, because they make this huge, the biggest project in the history of UNESCO called the Revive the Spirit of Mosul. So they invest 1 billion in rebuilding, for example, the mosque and other buildings, but also in cultural programs, which are reviving the spirit of Mosul in another way. And they finance 3 projects, and one is the opening of a film school in Mosul by exact the same people and actors and institutions that made this Orestes in Mosul play. So we had to wait a bit because of COVID, but perhaps it was not bad. So we could prepare in a good way. And like 1.5 months ago, this film school opened its doors. So the idea again is to be sustainable, meaning that we bring cameras, we bring editing material, we bring sound material, we bring knowledge, of course. So we have teachers from here, from Baghdad, from Mosul, and all these people together with the teachers from the Arts Academy and other people of Mosul are constructing an infrastructure and the knowledge. So from script writing, producing, until editing and distributing, and it makes the whole process to produce films. Because what we understood, that distributing plays from Mosul is almost impossible. So to bring a group of actors out of Mosul it was impossible for us. We could bring like 2 actors, but it's super expensive and it's super complicated with the visa and the situation and everything. So we decided to go on film and to produce films that they can, like in 1 or 2 years. So like 3 days ago, I was in Paris talking to the general director of the UNESCO and the cultural minister of Iraq, which is a very clever guy, very close to the project we are doing. And I was telling him, listen, that's an investment we do now, together with UNESCO, together with you. But in 3 years, in 4 years, this will bring people, it will bring money, it will become a kind of an industry. It will become a system that is sustainable. And that's how art constructs civilization in a practical way, because we are all used to make blah, blah, blah. Art is very necessary because we all need to exchange blah, blah, blah. But I don't really believe in these arguments. Of course, they are true, but I believe in structural arguments. The older I get, the more I believe in these structures that let people work, that let people express yourself, and that has an outcome, and that creates a network. So for me, the next step is to produce films there, and then to make a film festival in Mosul. So I would be so happy if, because it's the most effective. I remember when we sent out the press announcement that we do this film school, then I had the New Gospel on the Venice Festival, and then like some months ago we were with Angelica Liddell on the Avignon Festival with the History of Theatre number 3. And immediately these people from these festivals were calling me and saying, okay, listen, Milo, we heard that you do this film school. What can we do? How can we help? How can we? And then I said, aha, let's do a festival together in Mosul. And we include this, and that's point number 8 of the manifesto, this city that is completely out of all networks. Of course, we exploit the oil. That's why ISIS was interested in Mosul, not because it's the oldest city of humanity, it's because it's surrounded by the biggest oil fields of the planet. We put this city again on the system of the art distribution, because it's my system, I know. I think if I would be like Ivan, a tomato producer, I would accept to produce tomatoes in Mosul, but now it's film. And that's how you can use art to, I think once we had a discussion, Freddie, and for me, Dorothy was interesting that you see that the oldest tragedies are written to abolish the tragic circle. I mean, the idea of every tragedy, of course, is of the whole construction methodology of telling this in public to people that comes back from war and goes and sees this, to tell it a last time, and then it's done and the circle is closed. So this was the hope from the beginning, and kind of closing this circle and opening another circle by using the tragic mind is, of course, a beautiful paradoxon that we try to do in Mosul, that we try to do in South Italy, and that we try to do in Amazonia with the Antigone. So I think it's to overcome the antagonistic conception of our civilization. Of course, I'm a Marxist, and I'm always saying blah, 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 then thesis, antithesis, synthesis, and you go to another level and you overcome it. But in the practical world of doing products and projects, it's really an outcome we should aim to. We should be optimists in it, we should really try to create systems that are sustainable like this. And I don't agree, by the way, with Katie Mitchell on no travel. It's a very Eurocentric point of view. I mean, it's an important point of view, but I remember we made a School of Resistance in Berlin at the Academy of the Arts, and I was inviting people from Africa, Latin America, and Europe, and to talk about touring after COVID. And then, of course, we had Jérôme Bell, and Jérôme Bell, I mean, that's the second one who is producing with us this no travel play. And Jérôme was saying, and I would sign it immediately, we shouldn't tour anymore, we should just send concepts, and then they do it, blah, blah, blah. And then these people were saying, yeah, but you are in the center of the cultural power and the cultural capital. If we can't tour anymore from I don't know, the Democratic Republic of Congo or from Brazil, we don't have capital, then we are lost. If we can't go to the Festival d'Avignon, where would we produce? With which money? Where would we show it? So it's much more complex than no travel. And that's also, by the way, why we changed the title now from no travel to something else.
We have a beautiful fragment to conclude, the Institute of the Fine Arts. Is it possible to have a look at that?
With sound.
Pass it to full screen, it's easy, yeah.
Screen,
Good.
yes, okay.
Could we restart it? Could we restart this film because we lost at the beginning? Yeah.
مرحلة خامسة.
Yeah.
Okay.
Put it in full screen.
أنا اسمي مصطفى خالد جمال، طالب معهد فنون جميلة قسم المسرح، مرحلة خامسة في اليوم الرابع. أعطونا بعض التمارين الرياضية من التمثيل، وطرحوا علينا بعض من الأفلام، من النماذج من الأفلام السينمائية، وأعطونا بعض النصوص أيضا نقوم بقراءتها في اليوم الخامس.
أنا ديانا فيصل، طالبة معهد فنون جميلة، المرحلة الرابعة. اليوم الخامس طرحوا لنا بعض الأسئلة ونصوص قصيرة. قمت بتمثيل مسرحي قصير أعجب أعداء المدربين.
تحدثنا، أخذنا محاضرة عملي شلون نستعمل الكاميرا، شلون نثبت الكاميرا على الستاند، وبعدها أخذنا يعني المحاضرة النظرية عن تاريخ السينما والتطور اللي صار بهاي الفترة يعني عن السينما.
شايف كان دخل نلغيها، بالسيناريو ما في شيء كان، دائما الحدث يحدث الآن.
So what you see here is the first phases of the film school, which is actually a school with now the first generation 25 students, and 1/3 are female. So that was very important for us. It's also a topic in the Oresteia, of course, or in our adaptation of it. To bring all the women back to the cultural life, especially in the former capital of the Islamic State. So it's of the self-declared Islamic State. So it's the first generation. You see, they are going through different phases of how to produce film. So it starts, of course, with acting classes, finding a story, writing the story down, making the breakdown from the story to a production plan, going visiting, learning to shoot, learning to use the sound equipment, making the film, producing the film. So it's not only for actors or directors or cameramen, it's also for producers, it's also for people doing the script and so on, people doing the editing. So the whole school goes onto the editing and continues with these different departments, that then it becomes possible to make films themselves. What is possible today, very, very well possible today, to enter quite fast in the circuit of distribution. Because when we produce 9 short films in the next 4 months as an outcome, that we will present then in Paris and Mosul, and then try to infuse in the circuit of festivals too, and from there continue to make films. So the idea is really to build an incubator that then can produce and distribute the stories from Mosul. And all started with Orestes in Mosul, so just a humble theater project, and that's where we are now.
Maybe just to end up, Milo, the All Greeks Festival, 32 Greek tragedies. Next years?
Yeah, that's an idea I had during COVID, because I was asking myself, why always play in the evening? Why always play inside? Why always play on one space? And as you know much better than I know, there are 32 tragedies that came to us, and then we decided to give these 32 tragedies to people in Flanders and the Netherlands and France, so locally, to different directors, companies, institutions to Europe, but also outside Europe. You could say a reappropriation of the stories that the Greeks, by their first civilizing the at that moment known world, stealing the stories, bringing them to Europe and making them to the basis of the European civilization, to bring them back to the world, to let them reappropriate and interpret what they might mean. As one example, the Antigone in the Amazon that we are doing with the landless movement in Brazil, so the biggest social movement in the world, several millions of families occupying land, and they work together with the first people, with indigenous activists in Amazonia, and that's where we started to work on it in a big workshop to rewrite together with these activists the Antigone. And for example, I remember when we were talking about this kind of morbidity of the Greek tragedies, that in the end almost everybody has to die or suicide or whatever, so that the story can end. They didn't accept. They said activists would never suicide. So the player of Crayon said, the actor of Crayon said, but I would not suicide. I would not do it. It can't end like this. And then that's what I mean with appropriating a story in total. It becomes not only new words, it becomes new motivations, it becomes a new outcome, and tragic turns into, I don't know how to call it, to utopic perhaps, something that is going from the past to the future, turning around the logic of the logic of the tragic mind to something that is much more optimistic in a way. And that's also for me very important. I think that we all started with this kind of story that in 10 years it's over. And when I was listening to you, Freddie, and then Paris disappears in the water, and of course Flanders disappears, and the whole half of the rest of the world also disappears into water, and so on. So sometimes I feel the need to have small practical stories of hope, of another future, and that's the whole meaning of all these small what we call microecologies, these small projects in Mosul, in the All Greeks Festival, to bring the Greeks to the world again, and then perhaps conclude once forever the tragic mind. Who knows?
Thank you so much, Platon. I think you will take over now.
Yeah. To take over.
Platon.
Well, if you want me to, yes, but I still enjoy this exchange between both of you. Maybe we should ask the people who are following if there is any question to address to. We have some time. Yep. You can use the chat, or you can raise your hand, as you know, on the screen. Oops. Yeah. Sorry? The window? Okay, let's go to the room and have a question. Yes? Yes, please, Aspasia.
Hi, thanks very much for being with us. To you both, of course. I would like to ask, because you mentioned how you tried to make the manifest as explicit, almost pedantic, and I thought of Edouard Louis and his concept of making art explicit instead of hiding the meanings under, I don't know, poetic devices. And I was wondering whether this is the approach that you use when tackling ancient Greek tragedies, for example, in the way that you use them, that you take elements, this explicitation, let's call it, process.
I think we should be very careful to, I mean, it was an old and very good friend of mine, but we should be very careful of not mixing institutional transparency and clearness and the kind of what we talk about poetics, if we like explicit or non-explicit art or formalistic art or documentary art more than you know, and then of course you would label the formalism and everything as bourgeois art and revolutionary art is explicit and political, and there's an outcome. And I think there I'm not so much in the, or let's say what concerning the manifesto, I really tried to take me off of this discussion. So you could work with this manifesto as Castellucci, which is very formalistic, but you could also work with this manifesto as Rimini Protocol, which is extremely explicit. So I think it's, for me, it was really to hold it open, because I didn't want to dictate. I wanted only to dictate myself, to say, as an institution, I want to give the space to these kind of people or of stories, and I want to give this space to a diverse public. I want to say that everybody who works here, that we will bring this work to the world, and it will not just disappear in our house like it happens so many times in the city theater, that we travel somewhere like Mosul, that there is an outcome, so that we are explicit and we are concrete, and we are not like saying, I don't know, you could read so many self-declarations of artistic institutions that are using all the beautiful words about diversity and minorities and blah, blah, blah. But on the big stage, they just bring with professional actors the Shakespeare play. And I think this is what has to be changed. But then I don't dictate to I mean, when I worked with Edouard Louis, I worked very differently when I would work with again with somebody like Angelica Liddell. I don't agree at all with Angelica Liddell politically and aesthetically, but I really have a lot of respect what she does. And yeah, but I don't know if I answered in a good way, but I think to being explicit, I mean, you could even produce a formalistic piece of art and being explicit besides this piece of art. You could use a manifesto that you don't have to be polemic in your place because you don't like it. And I can fully respect that. I'm personally also sometimes prefer not to bring the manifesto onto stage, because as a public, I often feel that it is not very effective to be taught from the stage. So I try not to do it as much as I can. For example, my plays are often melancholic, pessimistic, and negative. And in my political work, I'm absolutely not. So, for example, I'm now rehearsing in Zurich, and then I had a big discussions with the ensemble, because they said, okay, there's so much violence and so much sadness in your plays. And I said, you know, there is the production process, and it can be the most happy, the most productive and positive and human to have an outcome that shows the sad realness of death. So there's a very difficult balance, and when you then go to read the books of Edouard, especially his second newest book about his mother, which is a very poetic and very soft and very somehow non-political book. So I think also poetry is part of the political, and I mean, we could talk a long time about production process and aesthetics, and that these are two important things, but we shouldn't mix them too much. And voila, that's what I perhaps can add to your statement.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, I see a message from Alexander saying that there's a lot to digest. So we don't have questions, but a great big thank you to both of you for this thought-provoking presentation and discussion. Okay, thank you, Alexander, for that. But still, if there is any other questions, yes, please.
Hello, sorry for that. My name is Anastasia Komidu Hathaway. I'm a Greek-American stage director and an actress of the National Theatre of Northern Greece. I highly appreciate your whole global, interdisciplinary, intertextual, inner political, inner view. I've been cherishing your work for a long time. I have one question to ask you, which is something I always face as a stage director every time I come into creating a performance in terms of activism and stuff. How do you treat acting when you have to deal with activists, amateurs, versus when these people have to work together with professional actors? What is your, let's say, directing baguette? You know what I mean? What is the way that you treat the acting thread when you have to when these people have to coincide and co-create together something that is so highly political, so highly, social acute, and all of that stuff? And what is the weight of what is the weight that you give to the acting method? I'm not using it in the Stanislavski way. I'm using it in a broader sense. Thank you.
You could say that I engage. If you take the New Gospel, then I engaged some of the most known actors of our time, like Marcello Fonte, who is really the biggest Italian actor existing. And I engaged him because I like what he does as an artist, but I also like who he is and how he himself becomes, you could say, a coach when he's with non-professionals together. So I would say that the professional actors in my place become co-directors or coaches of the non-professionals. Of course, on the other hand, the necessity of an activist to take part in a project like Antigone and the Amazon or like the New Gospel infiltrates itself also into the minds of the actors that are not Stanislavski anymore, as you said yourself, but become a much broader attempt to also express their beliefs, questioning who they are in these films. And I remember when I did Compassion, and then Ursina Ladi, which is one of my favorite actresses. We made Lenin, by the way, she played Lenin, and she played, I made in Salzburg a new version of Every Man, Every Woman with her, and then we also made Compassion. And I remember that in the beginning of Compassion, there is an actress from Burundi who survived another genocide, because you have many genocides in Europe, in this region too. And she was telling this story like 10 minutes. And then Rosina said, yeah, but why would I now come on stage to say what? How can I play a personage after this? What is the meaning of the act of transcending into somebody else if you listen to this and this is just real? And then you have to overcome it as a professional actor, and you find out again why you do what you do, and what is the utopian character of playing somebody else confronted with reality. And we come back kind of the beginning of all this playing somebody else to show something that you don't know to yourself and to the public by representing it. And I think to have this counterbalance, because I never made a project only with non-professionals, and I never perhaps the tribunals, but these are not plays. And I never made a project with only professionals. Perhaps Lenin was one with only professionals, but then we come to the point that I always try to use professionals like non-professionals, or to work with professionals like with non-professionals, and with non-professionals like with professionals. When I did 5 Easy Pieces as a children play, I said to the children, it's like playing football. We have to train every day. We have to train every day for months and for months and for months. And in the end, you can deliver. It's a hard work. And then we worked for 6 months every day with the children. And in the end, they were professional actors. And they found out that it's all about know-how. And they were so proud, and they were every evening they were asking Milo, how many percentage do we have now? And I said, okay, today it's 85. And then the day after it was 87, and then it was 89. And then at the day of the premiere, it was 100%. And, you know, so it's a bit like this.
Adding this conversation about the actors, also the performance of La Reprise, which is very much connected to this relation between amateur and non-amateur on how to represent and how to revive or remake an event. Which for me it was very apocalyptic on your way of treating the theater event actually.
Yeah, La Reprise, the repetition is a you could say a meta play, because it's really questioning. Oh, my computer's downloading something. I stopped this. Okay. Actually, it's the computer of my wife, because mine is not functioning anymore. So the La Reprise was a meta play, and of course in the middle, as in many of my plays, was the question, and that perhaps this was lying behind the question that was before, the power relation that you have between actors and non-actors when they are in a team, and how this can change, and how it is, because La Reprise starts with a casting situation where you see the non-actors being casted by the actors. And then you see them, and that's one of the stories of the play. There are many parallel stories, but one story is you see them growing as actors until the end, when they represent the death scene, which is the most complicated because it's almost impossible. So but then they know to do it, and that's also, yeah, a story of a kind of artistic education. Yeah. Reconstructs the murder on stage. That's it. Yeah, that's the final scene. Thank you, Freddie.
Another appointment, and although we would like to continue that, I totally embrace the idea of Alexander says that there's a lot of things to digest and to discuss, and I'm very happy that I see Gina with Freddie on the screen. I would like to thank Milorau for this so stimulating talk. I hope that we will meet again and have the possibility to discuss again on that. We will try to follow the continuation of your projects as we can. And probably we should stop here. I suggest that at the end of our meeting, we could pass again the small film we showed from your work, from the Orestes and Mosul, as I know that some people would like to see that again. If you agree?
Of course, I think perhaps you have to try to do it full screen.
Exactly, that's what we are going to do. And I think that this should be the ideal ending of our meeting, to just see again the extract and remember as much as I can from this wonderful discussion. I want to thank everybody to be there. Thank you, Milo. Thank you, Milorau, for being with us.
Thank you for having
We'll be very happy to meet again, and we'll try to be in contact in the future. Freddie, Gina, thank you so much. Dear all, thank you for being with us. We will continue again with the second part of this webinar, probably at the beginning of the next year, that we will discuss again with Greek and Czech performances of the OSTs. Of course, this discussion today broadened so much the limits of the discussion that I think that in the next discussions will be totally different in how we'll approach our subject. I can just add one or two informations that people who want to see the performance of Peter Stein, please send us an email and we will give you the password to see the performance. And we shall be in contact with Milorau if it's possible to show any other material that you find useful for the people who are interested to see. Okay. Well, thank you so much. Thank you for being with us. We stop here, but we will meet again soon, I hope. Thank you so much.
Thanking you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, Freddie. Thank you. Thank you, Henri. Thank you, everybody, being here.
No, not yet. That's the little one. Ah, that's the little one. Super.
I knew from the beginning on that this will be the crucial part, how to forgive, because it's really a story that is happening there, a legal story, but also a social story, how to forgive these people that killed your families and that oppressed you for years and years and killed you. So how can you do that? Is it possible? Pardon is important when you want to stop vengeance. You have to pardon, and the problem is that in the Oresteia, for example, you only have total pardon or you have the vengeance. You have to kill somebody. So you have to make the choice in between two extreme solutions of it, and that's exactly what is happening in Moscow, because they don't have a kind of a legal tribunal. So bring them to the camps where they are brought with their families, also a topic of the play. It's vengeance, actually. So, and pardon them, difficult too. And interesting fact is that what we found there, that a lot of people is kind of divided in it. They want to stop the vengeance, but on the same time, they can't forgive.
طبعا جمعتكم بهذا المكان حتى نتناقش ببعض الأمور، لأنه أنتم أقراب علي وأنتم تعتبروني فد شيء كلش غالي عندكم.
داعش هو اللي خرب مدينتنا، قتل الناس، دمرها بالكامل، من بيوت، من مستشفيات، من معاهد، كامل بالكامل. ومن نمسك داعشي، احنا المدنيين ما نقدر نقتله، نوديه للمحكمة العراقية وهي تاخذ مجراها. هذا اللي عندنا.
حلو. شنو رأيك؟
نحن نحتاج انه محكمة عادلة، محكمة نظيفة، محكمة خالية من الفساد تحكم الارهابيين اللي دمروا هاي المدينة. ما نريد محكمة بها فساد وممكن يدفعون فلوس ويخرجون من العقوبات. نحتاج محكمة حقيقية، محكمة بدون فساد حتى تحاكم داعش.
أنا برأيي إن نحاكم داعش بالقتل، مثل ما يوم قتلونا ودمرونا ودمروا هذا البلد. نقتلهم لأن يوم قتلوا طفل بريء، قتلوه ودمروه على مود شيء تافه. والناس فرد مرة دمرت، دمروا نفسيتهم، دمروا حياتهم، دمروا البلد مالنا كلته. عن أشياء خلونا نشوف شيء ما كنت شفناه عمرنا كله. خلونا نشرب مي الساقي، خلونا ناكل اشياء، يعني الحشيش خلونا ناكله، دمروا لهذا. انا برايي انه حكموا بالقتل وليس بالعداله.
انا لا استطيع ان اقتل، وانا لست مع القتل. انا لا استطيع ان اقتل دجاجه، فكيف بي ان اقتل انسان؟ وبنفس الوقت لست مع العفو. لا استطيع ان اعفو عن من دمر بلدي. هذا امر محير، هاي تراجيديا. أنا غير قادر على اختيار العفو أم القتل.
منو مع الانتقام؟ منو مع العفو؟ اخرس، هذا منكر من عمل الشيطان. لا تتكلم.
Gaitam is de vrouw die Athene gaat spelen, hier in Mosul. En dat is een vrouw die heel sterk is. Mij heeft ze al gezegd dat ze 15 jaar al niet meer geweend heeft. Die heeft al een onwaarschijnlijk leven achter de rug. Haar man is vermoord door Al-Qaeda voor ISIS hier was. Zij is een zoon verloren en die blijft gewoon heel hoopvol in het leven staan. bijna iedere dag gaat ze naar het kamp waar ISIS-vrouwen samen met hun kinderen zitten. Samen met slachtoffers, met andere vrouwen. En zij geeft les aan de kinderen. Voor haar zijn dat allemaal dezelfde kinderen. En zij vindt het heel belangrijk dat die geëduceerd worden en dat die gederadicaliseerd worden. En daarom krijgen die kinderen ook de gelegenheid om met een vrouw te werken die zelf eigenlijk in het begin van de oorlog 6 maanden gecollaboreerd heeft met ISIS om te overleven en daarna begrepen heeft wat voor gruwelijks die deden. Maar die is heel vergevingsgezind. En dat is hier een les dat je continu voelt. Ik denk dat wij de ideaalste Athena ever hebben gevonden met Geitam. Zij moet oordelen over goed en kwaad. Zij moet oordelen en haar stem telt uiteindelijk of de gemeenschap wel vergeeft of niet. Of ze samen verder gaan en stoppen met oorlog om de oorlog, revenge om de revenge.
Divine Athene, hear me. Apollo directed me to a temple, and here I stand in front of you, surrendering my trial, my hope, my life to your judgment.
أثينا ما تقدر تساعدك. هسه لازم تدفع الثمن. الحرية الخارجة عن القانون هي الشر. الإنسان ما يقدر يسوي خير إذا ما يمر بعواقب الشر.
والآن أنا مندهشة. من أنتم؟ من أنتم لتصدروا الأحكام؟ اسمحوا لنا لنكون عادلين. واسمحوا لي بأن أتذكر لسان العدل للعقل. حان الوقت للتصويت. أولئك الذين يصوتون للانتقام يرفعوا يداً. وأولئك الذين يريدون السلام يرفعوا يداً. هذه الأغلبية. سأضم صوتي إلى السلام أيضاً.
لا تحكي عن الحرب الأهلية كثير. الخبيث من كل سوء فهم حتى لا تقسم المدينة مرة ثانية.
ما يصير. عقلها منقسمة إلى قسمين وكل قسم واحد ضد الآخر.
لا ما يصير.
ماكو. انطي أثينا عقل واحد كل العقل. مثل الزواج ينطي 2 من الغرباء طفل واحد.
سلسلة القتل يجب أن تأتي إلى نهايتها. لقد تمت تبرئة أرسطس. انتهت الحرب. انتهت الحرب.
All around me are familiar faces, worn out places, worn out faces, bright and early for the daily races, going nowhere, going nowhere. Their tears are filling up their glasses, no expression, no expression. Hide my head, I wanna drown my sorrow. No tomorrow, no tomorrow. And I find it kind of funny, I find it kind of sad. The dreams in which I'm dying are the best I've ever had. I find it hard to tell you, I find it hard to take. When people run in circles, it's a very, very bad world. Bad world. Children waiting for the day they feel good. Happy birthday, happy birthday. And I feel the way that every child should sit and listen, sit and listen. Went to school and I was very nervous. No one knew me, no one knew me. Hello teacher, tell me what's my find it kind of funny, I find it kind of sad. The dreams in which I'm dying are the best I've ever had. I find it hard to tell you, I find it hard to take. When people run in circles, it's a very, very mad world. Mad world. Enlarging your world.
أنا اسمي مصطفى خالد جمال، طالب معهد فنون جميلة قسم المسرح مرحلة خامسة في اليوم الرابع. أعطونا بعض التمارين الرياضية من التمثيل، وطرحوا علينا بعض الأفلام من النماذج من الأفلام السينمائية، وأعطونا بعض النصوص أيضا نقوم بقراءتها في اليوم الخامس.
أنا فيصل، طالبة معهد فنون جميلة المرحلة الرابعة. اليوم الخامس طرحوا لنا بعض الأسئلة ونصوص قصيرة. قمت بتمثيل مسرحي قصير أعجب أداء المدربين.
تحدثنا أخذنا محاضرة عملي شلون نستعمل الكاميرا، شلون نثبت الكاميرا على الستاند، وبعدها أخذنا يعني المحاضرة النظرية عن تاريخ السينما والتطور صار بهاي الفترة يعني عن السينما.
شايف كان دخل نلغيها، بالسيناريو ما في شيء كان، دائما الحدث يحدث الآن.
And we have to stop here. And I hope to see you again in our next part of the webinar. I want to especially today thank Freddie for being with us and preparing all this material about Milo. Of course, please, I would like to thank also the people of Milo Rao that facilitated this meeting, or the group of Ghent who supported us in this workshop. Of course, I want to thank Aspasia for her work. I want to thank Anastasia Koumidou, the team of the technicians that are hidden behind the lights, and I can see them. And I know that we have a lot of things to discuss on technical materials, as usual. But you like them very much, and you thank you very, very much for being so helpful all these days, all these 3 days, which were very, very interesting for all of us. And of course, all the members of the network that have been here, Gogo Varzelioti, who's been a wonderful organizer. I would like to thank also Angeliki Poulou, who was the initial person of this idea. I also want to thank Xenia Calvara from the Mikhail Cacoyannis Foundation that asked us to organize this event. And of course, all the people of the Mikhail Foundation, the Mikhail Cacoyannis Foundation, Alexandra Georgopoulou, who has been assisting us, and all Andreas, Panayotis, and again the people of the technical group. Of course, Henri, Oliver Taplin, Henri Schoenmakers, Oliver Taplin, Erika Fischer-Lichter, Eleni Papazoglu, who did speak in these meetings, Konstantinos Stamatogiannaki, and Dimitris Dimitriadis. And although I wouldn't like to conclude and turn off the screen, I have to stop here and say καλή αντάμωση ξανά στο επόμενο εργαστήριο. Thank you so much for being here. Γεια σας.